Welcome back. The Prime Minister has already decided that July 10th will be the election for 50% of the upper house members. The election campaigning hasn't started, but the Diet has closed down, Michael, and they will start the election campaign from the 22nd of this month.
And that's going to leave just enough time to run the election campaign season until the election. They're pushing it really tightly and making it a very, very brief period of time for campaigning, which is, of course, always to the advantage of the incumbent.
Mm-hmm.
The longer that there's some kind of focus on the political process, the weaker probably the Abe administration will look.
Right.
By keeping it short, keeping it sweet, they get to the election and people say, oh wait, there's an election? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, I guess I should go to vote. I better vote for the LDP because they're in charge.
Right. They have a couple of advantages. One of them is calling the time. So he's already exercised that. The whole world knows now that 50% of the upper house will be elected on the 10th of July.
And that's going to create some interesting problems that normally would sink the opposition. Normally, this brief period of time would make it very difficult for there to be coordination, make it very difficult to be ready in every district. But the thing is, there's been so much discussion of this House of Councillors election over this last, almost a year, how crucial it is and how important that the disarray that we should have seen in terms of the opposition was resolved. And we saw over this past week, just after the Diet was closed, that they have really put together a very, very strong program. And it's not just the four parties that are led by the Democratic Party, with the Socialists, the Livelihood Party, and then the Communists. This four-party group has reached out to the the civil society groups that have been protesting the securities legislation and brought them into a vast coalition.
Right.
And then you have, of course, Rengel, the labor unions, which normally supports DP. They've been brought on board, and that's really something because they really dislike the Communist Party. So they've managed to coordinate not only in terms of some basic policies. They all agree that the Heneko base in Okinawa the construction there should stop. They all agree that Japan should have as a goal a nuclear power plant free future. They have a whole bunch of basic issues where they're basically aligned, despite the fact they're not running as a coalition. They're just running as separate entities working together. And they've managed to put together a slate of joint candidates for every single seat district.
Unbelievable.
They've got themselves ready. Now, well, I guess the argument now for a short season is, okay, everybody's ready. Let's just get it done.
Sure. The Prime Minister closed the Diet this time last week. They will start election campaigning in less than 2 weeks. There's a lot of space here for funny business to occur. And then once they got on to the elections, it's all everyone for their own.
Let's not oversell this idea that nothing happens until the 22nd.
Absolutely.
Because let's face it, the moment the Diet shut down, or even for the few weeks before the Diet was shut down,
a lot of fireworks.
When legislation completely ground to a halt and the LDP and the Komeito said, okay, over this last 3 weeks, we'll debate 2 bills, and that's it. That kind of pulling back has opened up a lot of spaces. I mean, I follow the Twitter feeds of a lot of the various politicians, and they're never in Tokyo or in their home districts. They've been all over the place trying to prepare for this fight. So they've been doing election campaigning for quite some time. And yes, there's an official date when the election campaign is on, and certain rules kick in, certain rules regarding the kinds of posters you can use,
the soundtracks
right. You can use, the way that you can alter or not alter your website. There are all kinds of rules that kick in during this so-called election season. But don't be fooled. Electioneering is happening right now.
Well, some people would say that the last Diet session could be characterized as just really irresponsible. They went through the summer with the security legislation, they bulldozed that through, and now up until the time that the Prime Minister closed the Diet, they didn't really pass any significant bills, even though there's lots of them waiting in line.
Well, the thing is, what the government seems to have done is completely stop acting as a legislative branch. Though at least the legislative branch didn't do anything. Instead, we had executive branch actions by Mr. Abe and his colleagues that we had just plan after plan after plan being kicked out by all these councils that surround the prime minister, talking about the 600 trillion yen economy, talking about creating a society where there are enough daycare spaces for all women who want to work to be able to put their children in daycare, and all people who need elder care or day services for an ill person have them.
More children.
They have just been kicking out all kinds of plans and plots that are going to all be wonderful if you vote for us. And the actual functional, the real work of government ground to a halt. Instead, it's all been propaganda and let's face it, PR.
Okay, so what's the fight going to be about? I think the Japanese population has a reason to be kind of up to here with the LDP. You were supposed to pass legislation. You were supposed to make life easier. Abenomics was supposed to work. It hasn't. What are we going to do about that?
That's the reasonable response. But unfortunately, campaigns are not necessarily run on reasonable grounds. In this case, is there a viable alternative? Now, the parties, the four-party group says, yes, there is. We are that alternative.
Yes,
and here's what we want to do.
Right.
And they are down the line, all the main proposals that the four-party group has offered are directly, it's like they go look at the public opinion polls and they say, that's what the public wants. That's what the public wants. And they look at the percentages and they always pick what the majority of Japanese citizens want in regards to all kinds of different matters, whether it's security, whether it's energy policy, whether it's social policy. They have the program.
Are we going to see some manifesto?
Oh, they have. The first manifesto was released yesterday by the extreme right-wing and completely hopeless Japan Heart Party, the Nihon no Kokoro. That's their actual name. And they made it very clear that they were putting out their manifesto first in order to get on the news first, because
what else did they have
to do? And their proposals were, increase patriotism, increase the defense budget, and all that stuff that they're going to say anyway. But yeah, we're going to see manifestos. But in the case of the four-party group, they have already put out, along with the civil society groups, a basic program. And I don't think they're going to be too enthusiastic about fleshing out the rest of what they're doing on a party-by-party basis, because that opens up the questions from the journalists. Excuse me, the communists want to do this, but you say you want to do that. How are you going to work that out?
And don't you know the LDP is just going to exploit that?
Oh, they certainly will.
Absolutely.
So I think there are going to be a lot of generalities being floated around, whereas the LDP is being very precise about all kinds of goals. Some would say too many goals for what they're trying to do, and presenting that we're going to do big bone reforms. We're going to push TPP. That's one of the DPJ, the Democratic Party of Japan. Its government actually agreed that Japan is going to be a participant in TPP. Now the Democratic Party, it's against the TPP in order to be in line with the other four parties. And the communists are dead set against TPP. So they've put themselves in line in order to get into electoral mode. But the LDP is sticking with TPP, even though with the United States election going the way it is, we're probably not going to see TPP being ratified by the United States, which makes the whole effort pointless.
We've seen that before, though, haven't we?
But in this case, it's going to become, it's part of the election here, pro versus anti-TPP. And let's admit that it's been not well sold by the government. And the arguments that are put forth, particularly by the communists, who have made, I think, significant gains in rural votes with their virulent and constant condemnation of TPP, That is, from day one, there was no ambiguity.
Right.
In the case of the LDP, there are some members that are for it, some members that are against it.
And
the DP has switched from pro upon. The communists have been straightforward. We are against it, and that's been a great selling point for them. This is going to be working out. It's going to be there is not much time, admittedly, when the campaign season starts, starting on the 22nd, for journalists to point out these discrepancies, these little fiddles that you've done, or big fiddles. That's part of the game.
It's really going to be an active time between now and July 10th, and I think there's going to be a lot of action. Let's say the LDP still comes out on top. The Prime Minister has set his sights low. I'm going to win half of the available seats. He's probably going to get that, even if he doesn't really campaign very hard.
Yeah, I think a set of mannequins with LDP stamped on them would get 61 seats.
Okay.
Yeah.
After the election, is it necessary for the Prime Minister to have a reshuffling of the cabinet? He can continue on with the cabinet that he has in place, right?
He could, and it would certainly, again, set a precedent. But most likely, because he will have led the LDP to a victory, there will be changes expected. I mean, that makes no sense in some ways. If the team that worked so well got us here, why should we change the team? But nevertheless, there is a sense that you have achieved something, you have a free hand,
right?
Go for it.
But there's also a parceling out of ministerial seats for people who really collected a lot of votes, who did extremely well in an election. And those people, I mean, there are a lot of people that are standing in line waiting for their post to come up because they've been elected or reelected 5 or 6 times. It's time for them too.
Yeah, there's a certain sense within LDP politics that when you're under stress, that's when you stay tight, and you don't go through this rotation after rotation behavior. Now, if they do as well as they're projected to do, they will be absolutely in a magnanimous position. They will be absolutely able to grant any wish because they will be unchallengeable. At that point, the internal dynamics of the LDP changes, and they start saying, okay, we've gotten past the mountain.
Right, let's fix some of the things that were irritating us before we got here.
Our interpersonal relationships that are so important.
That's what I wanted to ask your opinion on.
That's certainly going to come into play after the July 10th results come out. That there's going to have to be a reshuffle, even though the team that got us here should be rewarded. Yes, but the team is the entire party, not just the cabinet. And that's where there's going to be movement from people who've been waiting for so long to get a cabinet post. They waited since before 2009, the DPJ came into power, so the natural rotation of all these persons who are in mid-career didn't happen then, and then we've had a very stable cabinet since Abe's return in 2012, very few changes. They've been waiting, and once this big election's done, they're going to want their share.
A fierce fight is brewing indeed. Election campaigning starts in less than 2 weeks. The election will be called on the 10th of July. You can expect lots of fireworks.